Welcome, Courtney. It's good to have you. It's so great to be with you today. So I am up on the Logan campus. It's always so great to connect with our sisters and brothers around the state. And so it's great to be here. So I am in the College of Natural Resources and the Department of Environment and Society. And in addition to a whole bunch of work on water and natural resources, my work is on community well-being. And since 2019, we know that when we ask about different categories or domains of well-being, we learned from folks around the state. We had about over 16,000 responses in 2024. We hear that safety and security and mental health are supremely important to people's well-being. Also, physical health, family life, living standards pop up as top factors in making up those bundles of well-being that we talked about when I first started. Other factors are not unimportant, but they're a little lesser important as in the total bundle on average. But again, this is going to vary from person to person. When we look at the rating of these well-being categories, we can see that family life is rated really quite high in Utah. Safety and security, also generally, living standards, mental health, and connection with nature. So we have a fairly good broad background where we have some of these things that are important to folks are rated fairly high, and that's a really nice alignment. But what we need to zoom in on for our purposes here is that our substance use disorders, we've used different terminologies, so forgive that, please. But we can really see that amongst a whole slew of concerns that we ask about, I would say that the substance use disorders and access to substance use disorder treatment are really not very high, but they're not on the radar for most Utahns around the state. I believe that these data suggest that your average person around the state is not as aware of how prevalent and problematic our substance use disorders are in the state and in our communities and in our families and for individuals. So that's kind of I would like to think that the concern is because there's not a problem, although I know enough of you to know that there actually are some serious concerns here. So I think there's a little disconnect between our average resident and their level of concern. But the question is, as you look to the future of your city, how much of a concern are the following issues? And we have lots of other social and environmental and economic kinds of concerns rated much higher in concern for the future. When we break this down, so this is the concern about substance misuse, and these are all of the communities in the survey from 2024. And essentially what you can see here is that those top, where the concern lies, is generally in our rural communities, not so much our resort or high amenity communities. They're actually in the bottom levels of concern, right? Now, we do see that our rural community concerns are higher than our urban, but again, it varies within. So Midvale, which is much, much more urban, is in there with some of our more rural communities. We've got East Carbon and Price here in Carbon County, Vernal and Delta. Blanding's up there too. So the greater concern in these rural communities, the least concern in these high amenity communities and some of our rapidly growing but very suburban kinds of locations as well. Concern about access to substance use disorder treatment, a very similar story. The top 5 are very rural. The bottom 5 include rural communities, Midway, Emigration Canyon, but these are communities that are very wealthy. The median household income in these communities with lower concern is much, much higher, more than twice the median household income of those, again, that are at the top of concerns. Yes. What are the top 4 or 5? Yeah. Here on it, in terms of concern about access to substance use disorder treatment, we have East Carbonate, Price, and Vernal again as our top 3. We have Helper, which jumps up a little higher on access than it did on just the actual concern. We have Delta, Monticello, West Valley City, one of the urbans that jumps in here on access, Blanding, Ogden is high, Beaver, Bluff, and Logan kind of round out our top 10 there in terms of concern. So you see that there's not a lot of concern, and then we kind of bump out for some of our communities that are particularly attuned to this problem. Well, we know from a lot of literature and research, and I know that many of you know this as well firsthand, and it's very much a part of your work. We know that social isolation is a risk factor for substance disorders. And so what can we do at the community level to help with substance use disorders? What are our tools? Where are those glimmers of hope in our communities? And we can look to this Wellbeing Project survey data to help us with this too. We asked, how connected do you feel to your city as a community? And we can see that community connection, just like personal well-being, varies quite dramatically across our communities. And they vary within our urban communities, and that varies within our rural. There is no very clear-cut division between rural and urban. But you can see that community connections are higher in many of our rural communities. That's a tremendous asset that we have to draw upon. And we know that this community connection that we have, it matters. It matters in terms of overall personal well-being. The higher your level of community connection, the higher your level of that personal overall well-being. We see it also with mental health, which we know is a direct correlation to our substance use disorders. So we can see that the higher that level of feeling connected to your community, the higher our ratings of mental health are in terms of what we're finding. Well, what other tools do we have in our communities? We asked, there's a lot going on here, but we asked folks, what kind of activities do you have you participated in the last 12 months? And so we have community events, walking and biking, recreating in city parks, city rec programs, community gardens, using trails, gardening, buying food from a farmer's market, non-motorized or motorized recreation in Utah's public lands or waters. And in every case, those who participate in those recreation activities have higher community connection scores. So the effort in our communities in any of these regards, to work on trails, to have city recreation programs, to make sure our parks are healthy places and for people to spend time in, all of those efforts in our communities pay off because they make people feel more connected. They also, in fact, increase our well-being scores and our mental health and physical scores as well for most of these. So the bottom line here is that community is a resource for handling and helping to address our substance use disorders through the pathways of community connection, through improvement of the overall personal well-being, and setting that context for support. Now, there are great support and resources throughout the state. We've got Safe Utah, where there's a chat line for crisis intervention. There's the 988 Lifeline. There's the USARA or ZARA program that really recognizes the importance of love and connection that can help to build these community connections, these social connections that really support folks who might be struggling and give them a pathway and a network of support around them. We know that finding treatment is a challenge. We hear this in the data, but there are resources to help. So we've got the findtreatment.gov where we can type in your zip code and find a treatment facility near you. That's a great resource. We know that our prescriptions are an issue. There's our website, Know Your Script, that can really help folks to realize what they should do with their prescriptions, how to manage those well. And with that, I want to thank you. We are going to, I think it's looking quite likely that we can do this survey again in early 2026. We do have the ability to monitor some of these concerns over time. So if your community is doing a big push to address these issues, we can monitor those levels of concern. And in many cases, we see concerns mirroring actual problems, But with awareness and we increase the concern, it can also increase our community support around folks who might be struggling. I want to thank all the sources of funding, Extension, Utah League of Cities and Towns, Wasatch Front Regional Council, some USU entities, and the cities that have contributed. I appreciate you for being here today, and thank you. Do we have time for a couple of questions, Aisha? One or two questions if there's something on the top of your mind.
Have something?
One over here? No, over there.
So what? Okay, yeah. So is this our public? I mean, will anybody get it? Will we got to things results?
Absolutely. So this website here, the www.usu.edu/Utah-Wellbeing-Project, and all of our reports are up there. We are working the rest of this year to put topical reports so that we would have a fact sheet on substance use disorders and fact sheet on suicide, fact sheets on transportation, you name it. So that's what we're working on the rest through the summer and in the fall.
So the best way is to go to the
The best way to go to the website, but if you have specific questions, you can always reach out to me, and we, my team, will get back to you as fast as we can. In the back, yes.
When you talk about Adam as topic, sorry, and can rate those thought questions down first. What and how does it work? Whether it would like but marginal.
No, not in the survey itself. Although in the survey, we also have questions about transportation and barriers to transportation. So we can get into the data and find out if there are certain other attributes, demographic attributes, or attitudes about transportation that correlate with that. And we know in our rural communities, access to public transportation is a big problem. And just generally, some transportation barriers, distance itself is a friction, right? So we know that there's a correlation here in terms of the factors that address overall well-being, and there's got to be a bridge there between those access problems and those transportation issues. So there is data in the project that can, I think, address this, but we didn't ask them specifically on the substance use disorder. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time. Thank you, Dr. Fons.
And I presented it.
I'm going to pull up our next presenters.